was March 1993, and my wife and myself, her brother Rob, and his wife Cheryl had packed ourselves up for the day. We had loaded into a 1973 Lincoln Town Car. We used to call it the Banana. If you look on the screen, you understand why. What a ride this thing was. You see, we were traveling full-time. We had a bus, and when we would arrive at the church we were at, we would park the bus there. This is how we would get around town. We were in southern Florida, down in Homestead, and it was an exciting day because it was our first day off in a very long time of service after service after service at churches. And so on that day, we had loaded up the beach bags and gotten the suntan lotion, grabbed our bathing suits, and we had a destination in mind. We were going to see if the Banana could take us all the way to Key West. And so we got ready to drive that trip. We were so excited, and so we loaded up. I jumped in the driver's seat and pulled us out, and we wangled our way out to the highway, and we began to ride along. And we're talking and laughing and joking and eating Doritos and drinking Mountain Dew, and some things haven't changed for your pastor. And we're just having a great time riding along, anticipating the beach and going across all those keys and making it to Key West. And so mile after mile is passing, carefree under the tires of the Banana. But suddenly I begin to get a little troubled. I'm wondering why I'm not seeing any signs for Key Largo. It's been almost an hour and a half of driving now, and I'm thinking by now we should be seeing these things. And so while the others are talking, I'm starting to pay much more careful attention to the road. And suddenly a terrible realization begins to dawn on me. And finally I pull off an exit and go to the side of the road. Now you have to remember, these were pre-GPS days, folks. These are when you actually had to know something about geography to drive. Amen, moms and dads, all right? And I had to confess to the other three that instead of driving south, I had been driving north. And you see, I was tempted. When I realized what I had done, I was tempted not to tell them. But here's the problem. You can't just keep driving the wrong way and think you're going to get to the right destination. You see, it's a simple rule of the road that we all understand. It's this. The same road, taking the same direction, always leads to the same destination, doesn't it? You understand it doesn't matter how many Beach Boys songs we would have sang. It wouldn't have mattered how many bathing suits we had packed. It wouldn't matter what age we were, how much money we had, or even what speed we were driving. If you go north, you're never going to end up at the Keys. And I don't have anything brilliant or unique to say to you in these last few minutes to wrap up this weekend, but to point out to you a simple truth that I have spotted in people that I think you know too, and it's this. Why is it so obvious? It's not rocket science for us to agree that when you are on a road, you go where it leads. But yet for some reason we think that's not true when we talk about every other aspect of our lives. You see, if you've been around me for very long at all, at some point in the sermon, you have heard me say this. I probably wasn't the first to say it, but I've been saying it for years. Your life is not the sum total of the dreams you dream. Your life is the sum total of the choices you make. A couple years ago, Pastor Andy Stanley, who pastors down in Atlanta, said something very similar. He's just more creative and finds better ways to coin the phrase. He coined it the principle of the path. And it says this: direction, not intention, determines your destination. Look up at the screen and digest that with me for a minute. Direction, not intention, determines your destination. If you're tracking with me, say amen. All right, let's try saying it together. Read that with me. Direction, not intention, determines your destination. Again, direction, not intention, determines your destination. Turn and say it to your neighbor right now. Direction, not intention, determines your destination. And this undeniable truth, long before I was saying it, long before Andy Stanley stole it from me and preached it to that huge church down there in Atlanta, long before that, Jesus said it. Tucked in right near the end of his most famous sermon, you can find it in Matthew chapter 7, Jesus said this, look at this scripture on the screen, enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Jesus said, you choose a path for your life, and that path arrives at a destination. In fact, Jesus said this, the path, we define it by the name of the destination. And he said there are only two pathways. There's not 20 or 30 or 95 of them to choose from. There is the road that leads to life, and there is this broad road, this wide road that many take that leads to destruction. And nobody else chooses your road for you. You choose it. You pick the road. And you decide, therefore, where you'll end up. Here's the problem. When we come into church, sometimes I think we try to tell ourselves that what we are about is intention. In other words, we come in and we say, okay, what my spiritual life is about is primarily about coming and setting my intentions right. In other words, if it's enough for me to say, I want to be, I intend to be a godly man, or I intend to have a great marriage, or I intend to raise my kids to love Jesus more than anything, or I want to be financially secure and a blessing to God's kingdoms and others. Or we say, I want to be pure. And then forget that in reality, it's about the road, not the intention. It's the direction of our life that determines our destination. And it's the choices that we make every day that set us on the road that leads to life or the road that leads to destruction. You see, it's not enough to say, well, I think that's what I want to do, or even I'm determined to do that. What road are you on? Young ladies, teenage girls, college girls, hear me. You can say that your intention is to have a great marriage, to find a godly man who will love you and will passionately serve God and will give you this great life with you. And you can say, that's my intention, that's what I want. But then if you go out and date any guy you want just because you think he's cute, those aren't the choices that put you on the road to life. Parents, we can say, I want to build financial security. I want to use my money wisely. I want to be able to be used by God when I see a need, to have the capacity to just jump in and meet a need. And you could say, that's my intention. That's what I want. But when you keep building consumer debt and keep buying absolutely everything you want, even though you don't have the money for it, when you keep eating out, when you can't afford to do so, when you've always got to have the newest model car and it constantly leaves you under the weight of debt, it's not your intention that takes you where you're going, it's your decisions that do. It's the road that you are on, and it's the daily choices that you make. You can say, I want to be healthy. I want to be mentally sharp. I want to be around to help my kids raise my grandkids. And I want to live a long life that way that impacts the earth. And that's my intention. But then you mistreat your body. It's not your intentions that get you there. It's your decisions that do. We can say, I want to raise my kids for Christ. I want them to have a deep and abiding respect and love for God. But then when they look at you, Mom, when they look at you, Dad, and they watch the way you talk or what you prioritize, or you think it's cute or funny that someday your teenager will find your hidden stash of Playboys and wonder why they have no respect for your faith. Because all day long we can say, I want this, but the question is, what road are we on? Because the principle of the path simply says, direction, not intention, determines our destination. And one day we wake up and say, wow, how did I suddenly get into all of this mess? But you didn't get there suddenly, did you? You passed mile marker after mile marker after mile marker on the road. What tremendous bravery it requires, teens, kids, parents. What bravery it requires to say, I will walk a road different than the one so many other people are walking. Ask yourself, why are there so many people on that road that leads to destruction? It's because the Bible reveals that the natural bent of mankind, of all men and all women, is not towards God, but away from Him. Proverbs 14:12 says, there's a way that seems right to a man, but in the end it leads to death. And so we look around and we say, well, all those people are on that road over there. And so peer pressure just pulls us. It just draws us. Now stop and stay with me for a minute. Because whenever you see that term peer pressure, everybody thinks teenagers. Peer pressure. Oh, teenagers, like we saw, demonstrated in the drama up here a few minutes ago. But I'm going to tell you something. As you get beyond your teenage years, we might change terminology, but the reality is exactly the same. You know that, adults? As you get older, you call it societal pressure. We'll call it conformity. We'll call it keeping up with the Joneses. We just call it going with the flow. But it's the same thing. Something inside says, you know what? I just do that because that's what everybody else is doing. We can't all be wrong, can we? But Jesus said, you know what? There's a wide road, but it doesn't make it the right road. It ends up in destruction. But there's a narrow road, and it ends up in life. It never ceases to amaze me. The things we are willing to do and say and stomach to be liked, to be popular, even just to not stick out and to blend in. We will mutilate our bodies because people tell us we have to look a certain way. We'll shipwreck our finance to try to impress people that aren't paying any attention to us anyways. We will compromise our standards because we think, I have to sleep with him to keep him. We will swallow truth and be silent about things that matter very much to us because we think it's unpopular. You might say, it's just peer pressure. It's not really a big deal. Let me tell you what that reveals about our mindset. And if I haven't gotten real yet, and it's about to get really real, because here's truthfully what happens when we are willing to knuckle under being most concerned about what everybody else thinks, and it's this. Our perspective is big people, little God. That's what it is. When we decide what we are going to do and how we're going to live and what road we're going to travel down based upon worry about what everybody else thinks, we have made people big and we have made God little. It's because we are afraid of people. So I'm not afraid of people. I walk down an alley. I'm big and strong or tough, or I got wisdom. I got experience. I'm not naive. That term, the fear of people, in its largest terminology, as you look at it biblically from this idea of fearing someone, is being controlled by what they think. You're worried about what everybody else thinks, and what God thinks, well, not so much. And we become servants to people. You see, you need to know today, Jesus said everybody serves some master. Everybody serves some master. For so many of us, we serve the master of people, and we make people big and God little. I understand how enticing this is to do, because within my own natural personality type, I greatly desire for people to like me and to look positively upon me. Years ago, I actually took what's called CPE, Clinical Pastoral Education. And for 4 months, in addition to pastoring a church, 3 days a week I was traveling into this hospital system. And there I was studying and learning about what it means to be a chaplain. And I was underneath the leadership of a director of all this. He was a very insightful man. And as I traveled through all this, I was not only underneath his teaching, but I was under his observation. It was part of my degree program. And at the end of the whole program, he would write this extensive review, multiple pages about me and what he observed and my characteristic traits and how I behaved and all of that. And in the middle of all that, he wrote this sentence about me, probably as descriptive as anything I've ever seen. And I quote it to you word for word. He said this: I see Todd as a basically good person who works hard to like and to be liked. That's me by character and nature. I hate when people don't like me. I don't understand it. I look at me and think, I'm likable. It bugs me when someone doesn't like, well, what's not to like, you know? I'm easy. You know, I used to think I was the easiest going guy on the planet, and some people have come to me and said, you know what, Todd, sometimes your intensity scares people. Like, how could I ever scare anybody? In fact, in my CPE review, he said, you know what, Todd, he said, you have this intensity that comes out sometimes that scares people a little bit. I said, no way, I don't really. He said, yes, you do. He says, and the more intense you get, the higher your voice gets. And I'm like, are you sure? Because I just want to be liked. I just want people to get along with me. I hate when I know someone is upset with me. And so I know what it is to feel peer pressure. I know what it is to be tempted to make people big and God little. And even the Apostle Paul knew he had to evaluate his life to make sure he would stay on the right road. Not making people big and God little. Look what he wrote in Galatians 1. Am I now trying to win the approval of men or of God? Or am I trying to please men? If I were still trying to please men, I would not be a servant of Christ. Now listen, you think I preach direct. How'd you like to sit under Paul's preaching? Here's what he said. If you're spending your life worrying about what everybody else thinks and making all of your decisions based on trying to please them and behave the way they do, you better double check. You're not a servant of Christ and you're on the wrong road. If you don't like that, you'll have to take up with Paul someday when you meet him. And I trust you will, all right? Because our life is not the sum total of our intentions. It's the sum total of our decisions and how we choose to live. And so if you show up at the parties and you behave like all the others do, when you set up no moral standards for yourself that are no higher than the world around you, you are making people big and God little. Mom and Dad, when you have to make decisions about what to say yes to and what to say no to your kids, and instead of consulting God and praying about it and looking at His Word and saying, okay, God, give me wisdom to know what to say yes and no to, you just put your finger to the wind and see what's the most popular and see what all the other parents are doing. You're making people big and God little. When we run around so busy, putting every other thing as more important than God in our lives, and serving God becomes last place, and showing up at church becomes something we'll do when the camper isn't out, and when all the other things that we want to do are done, then we'll show up at church, and then we ask ourselves, why don't my kids want to serve God more than anything else? It's because you can say your intention is whatever you want, but you're walking down a certain road. But there's a remedy for this, and Proverbs tells it to us. It says this: fear of human opinion disables. Trusting in God protects you from that. See that? Look at that. It says, fear of human opinion disables. You become disabled if people are big. But to put our trust in God, to reverse this, and to make God big in our minds, and people little, breaks the chains of peer pressure, breaks the chains of keeping up with the Joneses or just going with the flow. If you knew how precious you are to God, it would be your privilege to see him big in your life. And so some of us today say, you know what? I'm going to break free. I'm going to shift my perspective. I'm going to get on that road that leads to life. But then here's the other stumbling block to that. Some of us say that I'm going to do that sometime real soon. I'm going to do that tomorrow. You see, putting it off is the other great danger. You see, some of you today say, you know, to be honest, if you really, just had a magnifying glass and could look into my life, you would see some things that aren't the way they should be. But they'll probably just work out. Let's just give it some time. Can I tell you something? The destination of your road isn't going to change just because you drive on it longer. Right? Isn't that self-evident? In fact, the longer you drive on it, the closer you get to arriving at the full destruction. But we put it off. We say maybe sometime later. We rationalize it away. My marriage is only a little worse today than it was yesterday, and we did really good last week. We didn't argue at all. Granted, I was on a business trip and we didn't see each other, but we did really well. I think we don't really need to do anything. We'll be fine. We'll get through it. My addiction is only slightly worse now than it was a year ago. I'm going to be all right. And we just keep passing mile marker after mile marker after mile marker. But Proverbs 27 says, a prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton, you know what a simpleton is? A dummy, all right? Goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. Have you taken note of the fact that God puts your eyes in the front of your head so that you can see what is out in front of you? And you can be warned. And the Spirit of God stirs you and says, that's where you're headed. You don't want to go there, do you? You don't want to go there, do you? And we have the wisdom to take the precaution in moments like today and say, not another step down that road. Not one more. I want the way that leads to life. You don't have to get into the middle of the storm and suddenly go, oh man, why didn't I? Because you see, as we move to wrap up here this morning, the objective here is not for you to leave and say, well, I came to church and Pastor Todd preached really direct today and it felt kind of bad and I left, and I guess that's kind of a religious experience, right? Preaches and I feel bad, then I go home. And I can come back next week and just feel bad again about where I'm at. You know what? The objective isn't for you to listen and feel bad. The objective is to do something about it. The objective is to say, now is the time to say, I can't continue to hang out with those people and behave like they do. The objective is to make the change that says, you know what? I've got to change how I'm spending. I've got to change how I'm talking. I've got to change who I'm taking my cues from. I've got to stop just looking around to see what he thinks or she thinks so that I can decide what I am going to do. Because if going out the door today, every one of us, if you and I sat and just had an honest heart-to-heart gut conversation, not the fake conversations that we're all in the habit of doing that kind of only lets on a little bit, but had honest conversations, for many of us, the conversation would go like this. Well, what did you think today? Well, you know what? God spoke to me about some things, Pastor Todd. So what do you think? Do you think you're going to make a change? Probably not. Because there's lots of other people that don't either. And we come to church and call that a spiritual experience. And I've told you before, so many people will say to me going out, oh, Pastor Todd, you really stepped on my toes today. And you know what I say? Well, isn't it about time you moved your feet then? And we do something about it. Leaving here and just saying, well, I intend someday to change roads. You see, direction, not intention, defines your destination. A few years ago, I gained I guess I'll call it a new appreciation for the Wizard of Oz. And the reason was because my 3 youngest kids were all in the Port Tobacco version of that. And so I became very familiar with the dialogue and the music of the Wizard of Oz. Can I tell you right now, I don't know why my kids would ever want to be in the Lollipop Guild, but I've had about enough of it, whatever that is. But you've seen the Wizard of Oz, right? If you haven't seen the Wizard of Oz, you're like not American or something. I don't know. But it's a classic story, and Dorothy is the classic teenager, and she's confused, and she's uncertain, and she winds up far from home, right? Classic adolescence, far from home. And then she says, oh, there's no place like home. I'm not sure that's classic adolescence, not sure. But she says, oh, there's no place like home, and she doesn't know how to get back where she needs to be. And then this bubble comes down, right? This bubble comes down, and out of the bubble pops this woman with an inordinately wide dress, right? Glenda. She says, Glenda, what am I going to do? And Glenda says, look, at the answer to your problems, what you got to do to get back to where you need to be is you need to get to the Emerald City, and you need to see the wizard. She says, okay, I got to get to Emerald City. And so she buys into that idea, and then there goes Glenda off in the bubble, right? All the little munchies going, hi, right? And she, boom, Glenda's gone. All of a sudden, he's like, wait. How do I get to the Emerald City? How do I get to the Emerald City? And in the next 60 seconds, I went and looked it up this week so I would not lie to you or exaggerate. In the next 60 seconds, Dorothy's told not once, not twice. She is told by singing or by vocally 12 times how to get to the Emerald City. How do you get to the Emerald City? Oh, you've seen this before. That's how you get to the Emerald City. You follow the yellow brick, follow the yellow brick, follow the yellow brick road, right? That's going to get you to the Emerald City. They say, don't misunderstand. It needs to be clear. There's one way to the Emerald City. You just follow the yellow brick road. Right? So obvious, right? But I learned something this week, and all of you, with apologies to all you Wizard of Oz aficionados would say, well, I already knew that. Someone in this room, what I'm about to say to you, is going to be new, and you're going to go home today, and you're going to YouTube it, and you're going to go, oh, he's right. Did you know that when Dorothy starts on the yellow brick road, do you remember how she starts? Like this, like this. Who drew that road, man? I'm telling you. Some munchkin not having a good day when he started the yellow brick road there. But she starts, did you know, as Dorothy is leaving and following the yellow brick road, that there also is a red brick road? Right there intertwined with it. It's right there. She chose the yellow brick road. And then you can fast forward an hour if you want to check this. You can check me on it. Fast forward about an hour of cinematography, all right? Dorothy, now with a bunch of strange-looking friends, arrives at the Emerald City, and watch the clip where she rings the bell and knocks on the door, and the really weird-looking dude pops his head through the door and welcomes them to the Emerald City. And you'll see eventually they pan down, and at the destination, there's only the yellow brick road. You see, Jesus said, there's one way that leads to life, and you get on it. And just as Dorothy said, I have a single-minded intention to follow that road to get to the city. We need a single-minded, not just intention, but then daily decisions that say, this is the road of life that I'm on. Because Jesus said, if you will follow me, my way leads to life. And it doesn't matter how many people are on the red brick road. It doesn't matter how many. Oh, by the way, all those munchkins who said, follow yellow brick road, follow yellow brick road. Not one of them went with her. You can watch it. They all follow her right to the edge of the city, and they're like, bye, good luck. It doesn't matter how many of your friends are on a different road. It doesn't matter how many of your neighbors don't care about God at all. The way of life is the way of life. Walk in it and discover in the end a city much greater than the Emerald City ever dreamt of being. Are you bold enough to go the right way? And are you bold enough to make that decision today and not put it off? I want us just to bow our heads together this morning in this place.